In the world of extraordinary classic cars, it's all about the hunt.
I told you the car was here. What do you think, I sit around and make stuff up?
And bringing one-of-a-kind cars back to life is all about the science. Recreating entire bodies from nothing more than a picture. Breathing fire back into long frozen engines. Generating parts that were lost years ago with the help of modern-day science. The search can take years, but the results are timeless.
Each cup ordered to a race car.
And classic car hunters never give up. Most rare and special cars ever made, drawing collectors and car buffs from all over the world, including comedian Jay Leno, who brought a really unusual car.
It's a 1916 Crane Simplex. It's only got 13,000 miles from new, so I'm still under warranty. If the factory hadn't closed in 17, I'd be all right.
At Pebble Beach, every car has a story, but none are more fascinating than the cars they call barn finds. Cars that have been hidden away for years or thought to be completely lost, only to be tracked down and rediscovered by people like Tom Shaughnessy, a man who makes his living hunting classic cars. Shaughnessy's office is a couple of hundred miles south of Pebble Beach in San Clemente, California. But by its looks, it's worlds apart from the perfectly manicured lawns at Pebble Beach.
I'm Indiana Jones. I'm not Albert Einstein. You know, if I had any smarts, I wouldn't be doing this for a living.
Shaughnessy is a former engineer who turned his passion for classic cars into a full-time business. On any given day, he's buying and selling rare parts for exotic cars.
And it is what it is, you know. I mean, I'm a junk dealer. It's okay. I'm a junk dealer of a higher level, but, you know.
A junk dealer who uses his contacts and connections in the exotic car world to track down rumors of long-lost cars. Barn finds waiting to be rediscovered. That's when Tom Shaughnessy, the junk dealer, becomes Tom Shaughnessy, professional car hunter.
The hunt is hard. The hunt takes tolls. You know, getting up at midnight regularly and driving all night on an if.
But sometimes, just sometimes, driving all night on an if really pays off big. Like this 400-mile trip to Palo Alto, California, a small city near San Francisco. It's a 7-hour drive crammed into a pickup hauling a big trailer. Joining Shaughnessy on the adventure is a man named Freeman Thomas, one of the top car designers in the world.
A son sitting in the back seat, and you're inside this truck with no place to move because it's got everything from tires to spare parts and receipts and titles to stuff all over the place.
It's 6 a.m. when Shaughnessy, his son, and Freeman finally make it to Northern California to see a man about a car. It's not exactly hidden away in a barn, but it most certainly is a major league barn find.
Wow.
Man,
Wow.
It's all screwed up, man. That's me.
No, this is awesome.
That's
Look
me.
at the grill. That's awesome.
And all before breakfast, yeah, while everyone else is sleeping, we're excavating.
What they've discovered in this particular excavation is a 1954 Ferrari 250 Europa. In the world of classic car hunting, this type of car is called a one-off, the only car of its kind ever made.
Well, let's get it out and get it in the truck, you know.
Get it into some light.
Yeah. Man, job. Nice. Oh, I guess we got a grandfather. Well, Freeman, this needs a lot of work, man.
It's kind of exciting, you know, that the first time that you see something that opens up the light of day, you know, for, you know, years, and especially from the design point, these cars, it doesn't matter whether they're rusty or beautiful.
Tom's next stop is at his good friend Steve Beckman's, a master craftsman and metalworker who specializes in restoring the bodies and metalwork on classic cars. He's so good that many of the cars he's already worked on have made it onto the lawn at Pebble Beach and won.
Another one for you, buddy. It's all Mickey Mouse right now. We need to make a radiator. We got chassis repair, general body repair. I'm gonna have pedal box stuff, probably a new grill and shift linkage stuff. And then you have to decide whether we're gonna replace or repair the fender walls.
They're all surprising.
This car hasn't been together in 50 years probably in this condition.
It's not going to be cheap. We do know that. But it is a beautiful car, and it needs to be restored.
Steve Beckman is an artist with a welding torch, but his favorite tool is called the English wheel. And that's what he'll use to create all the new body panels like fenders and doors for Shaughnessy's barn-find Ferrari.
This business is noisy enough, so I prefer the English wheel myself. This is a perfectly flat panel, and you have tension on your wheel, and you just make passes, you know, just a little bit beside each other.
Basically, it's a thickness-based device that allows you to squeeze the material down and stretch it locally to create these complex shapes.
It may be difficult to imagine that you can stretch something as hard as steel, but here's what's happening. At the molecular level, atoms in a sheet of steel are clumped together into crystalline structures called grains. When the steel is squeezed under the pressure of the English wheel, the grains are pushed up against each other to become tangled. The tangled grains are what hold the metal to its new shape.
The entire car is a compound curve. It's curved both directions. And now you can see that there's curvature in the panel. Both directions, this way and this way.
The tangled grains that make the metal hold its new shape also make the metal stronger. Steve Beckman uses a machine called a Pullmax to add strength to a sheet of metal destined to become the inside panel of a car door.
When I put a bead in here, it'll be a lot harder to do this. I mean, this is pretty weak, so it increases it tremendously. Anytime you put a brake or any kind of bend on it, change the angle to where it's just not a flat plane, it doubles almost. I mean, it comes a lot stronger. So now you can see it is strong. This is aluminum. So it adds a lot of strength to it.
Here's another surprise about the science of metal. Sports cars are made with holes in their frames and interior body parts as a means of making the entire car lighter. But contrary to what you might think, taking metal away by making holes also makes the car stronger.
This is a hole punch, press punch. There's all different sizes in here, from 2 inches to like 1/8. And when you need it, to move it, you just put a set up, turn it on, it goes through there and stops on the one that you want. It's a real clean, easy way to get a nice, perfect round hole. Punching a hole and making it stronger. So it gives you a nice, clean hole.
If you punch a hole, if you punch a lot of little holes, you're cold working the material locally because you're spreading the material out. And it strengthens the material locally, and it also has a secondary effect that if you do get a crack, it can't run very far. So it runs to the next hole and is blunted out, so it keeps the material from ripping.
Whether it's aluminum, brass, or steel, most of the time Steve Beckman is cold working metal in a shop, using machines that physically stretch, bend, or shape the metal without using any heat. But when he's welding, it's heat that alters the metal.
With the Ferraris, they never had real pretty welds. So if you make this beautiful weld, everybody knows that it's been replaced. So you have to take that in consideration.
Welding creates a small liquid pool of metal that solidifies when it cools, creating a permanent bond between the pieces being joined. It's a delicate process. Too much heat on the weld joint makes the grains in the metal larger, and larger grains are weaker than smaller ones. It will take months, if not years of research and hard work to bring Tom's barn find back to life. Someday, it will look as good as this car, a perfectly restored Maserati, and one of the most fabled barn finds in the world. Back at his shop, Tom Shaughnessy is on the trail of another barn find. This one isn't a 7-hour drive up the freeway. This car is more than 7,000 miles away in Brazil. He's got no idea how he's actually going to get the car, but he's already started buying parts and pieces just in case.
It's motorless, transmissionless, obviously interiorless, gaugeless. The asking price is about $500,000, and I'm already buying parts to solve a puzzle that I may have an opportunity to purchase, but it may just fizzle and die, and I got a big box of parts then.
Tom has parts everywhere, parts for all sorts of rare classic cars.
There should be a pair of them here somewhere. They only took me about 5 years to find. Shaughnessy, you know the brake parts are in here. You know I have one of these ignition switches. There's only 3. Just hold on, I'm pretty sure they're here somewhere. Yep, the shocks are found. You know what, I forgot I had these.
Tom sells about $500,000 of parts each year. That's how he pays the bills while he's out looking for barn finds.
So I decided one day that, you know, I could make $1,000 on a set of wheels, you know. Well, at the time, $1,000 was my mortgage payment. And I, you know, went to college to find out that I could sell a set of wheels to pay my mortgage payment.
What motivates Tom to keep selling parts and hunting down long-lost cars is knowing that they are out there, waiting to be rediscovered and restored. Knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the dream comes true. This magnificent Maserati is not only a one-of-a-kind car, it's a one-of-a-kind barn find. This is what it looked like when it was discovered buried behind a brick wall in a small village in Sicily for more than 30 years. It's a barn find that would eventually end up on the lawn at Pebble Beach. David Sidoric is a classic car collector. He spent 4 years obsessed with tracking down the Maserati because it was the only car of its kind ever built. A car simply listed in original factory records as serial number 2121. The final step in his quest, an all-night flight to Italy to meet the daughter of a man who originally bought the car in 1955.
We went into this little village, and as we were passing through it, I said, I thought I recognized this bar with all these vines hanging down around it. And she said, yes, that's where The Godfather had been filmed. We go down a little dark alley, and there's this kind of a garage. We go in the back door. It's full of all sorts of construction equipment. And there's a single light hanging down. She flicks the switch, and there is 2121. It's been there for at least a decade.
Serial number 2121 had been put away in a garage and a brick wall built around it to keep it hidden. To the untrained eye, the car was a disaster. But what David Sidoric saw was a long-lost treasure.
It was quite a find. The tires were flat. The car had been there for a long time. It was a dirt floor. It was a mess. I could see the car in the darkness, and I was surprised that all the paint had been stripped from the car. I wasn't quite expecting that. And I could see it, and I could just tell it was all there. It was the car. It was correct. It was original.
It may have been original, but it was in such bad shape that it took almost 2 years to restore. In 2002, after being perfectly and painstakingly rebuilt, David Sidoric took his Maserati to Pebble Beach, and it won.
We took it to Pebble Beach. Short story is, we won our class. It was a big success, and we couldn't be happier with that.
Nino Epifani is now part of the history of Maserati serial number 2121. He and his crew restored the car in their shop in Berkeley, California. It was anything but easy.
We were hoping to find it in a better shape. The oxidization went very deeply into all different parts of the car, of the body. You could actually push a finger through the frame and go through it. Whatever we touched was just crumbling in the hands. Still was one of the most difficult restorations we encountered.
One of the most difficult restorations because the Maserati's body and trim were all aluminum. Unlike steel, aluminum doesn't rust, it oxidizes.
We had to restore all the aluminum trim. Most of that was completely turned into, we call it Alka-Seltzer. Whatever we touched was just crumbling in the hands.
Crumbling because over time, when aluminum is exposed to both air and water, it begins to change at the molecular level. The bricked-in garage in Sicily was the perfect petri dish with ideal conditions for turning aluminum into aluminum oxide, the white powdery substance that Nino Epifani described as Alka-Seltzer.
All that had to be fabricated by hand, welded, refinished, and by the time it was done, it looked like just brand new.
Even brand new, these one-of-a-kind cars were full of surprises. And if you're lucky enough to come across a barn find, there are even more surprises.
When you look at an old Maserati and you look underneath the aluminum skin, it's actually, the supplies were so scarce after the war that the workers would go out at night and steal the signs. You know, they were made out of aluminum. So a lot of times the fenders are made out of old road signs.
Once you get into an old car, you find that it needs a lot of things, and you have to restore some things. Originality and authenticity is what it's all about.
Once it's all together, when the car is going to be judged, nobody can say it wasn't done by Maserati, it was done by us.
It has to look original, but that doesn't mean it has to be made the old-fashioned way. In fact, more and more classic car restorations are being done with the help of science and high-tech equipment. These days, words like digital imaging, computer numeric controlled machines, and reverse engineering are often used in the very same breath with the words Maserati, Ferrari, and barn finds.
Memory of the three-time Ferrari in America.
Every car at Pebble Beach is beautiful and rare. Some are cars most people have never even heard of, like the 1916 Crane Simplex that Jay Leno brought to the 18th fairway. In fact, it isn't the only really unusual car that Jay Leno owns. Among his collection of more than 100 automobiles is a car called the 1925 Doble Steamer. The problem with that car was that the engine was no longer making any steam.
There was very few of these cars made to begin with, so getting replacement parts is pretty much impossible. So he came to us looking to rebuild the pistons.
Jay Leno turned to Metal Crafters, a unique automotive facility in Fountain Valley, California, a company that uses the very latest science and technology to build state-of-the-art concept cars. They also use the same high-tech tools and methods to recreate classic cars from the past.
We had the old parts broken and all out of tolerance, and we had those as reference. And then Jay, somehow or another, had come up with some of the original drawings of these parts from like the 20s.
The engineers at Metal Crafters checked the original drawings, measured what was left of the broken parts, and then recreated the one-of-a-kind pistons in a computer-generated 3D environment.
It was a good, interesting mix of remaking some old parts with some modern tools. Certainly, 80 years ago, it would have taken a lot longer to produce these parts.
Back at Shaughnessy's, Tom's Ferrari restoration is temporarily on hold until he can find more parts. Meanwhile, he's lining up more barn finds.
Numbers match, no Mickey Mouse on the motor, just a real car. It needs rust repair. The doors have been, they started cutting some of the metal back, but that's about it.
I love going with Tom, like on the barn finds and stuff like that. We went one time up to the Santa Monica Mountains and trying to get a Maserati Ghibli convertible out of a container that had been burned.
A surprising number of barn finds are discovered only after the barn, the container, or wherever the car's been kept burned to the ground. What do you do then? You go to the experts at Metal Crafters, where digital imaging and powerful 3D computers can use just about anything left of the original car to create a new one.
I had some photos, had models, had parts of the car. Somehow it would be able to be regenerated digitally. How much time it takes is dependent on how much information you have to start with. It's fully possible to recreate a vehicle.
If you're lucky, the best way to start that process is with a sister car, a car that's either identical or at least similar in shape to the one that's been destroyed. At Metal Crafters, they're about to create a 3D computer file detailing every body line and contour of this classic Mercedes-Benz 190 SL. The process is called photogrammetry, and the first step is to spray a dulling powder to eliminate reflections. After the dulling spray is applied, the next step is carefully placing special target dots all over the car. These provide reference points that allow a computer to digitally stitch all the photos together.
I'm putting on the targets for registering my shots, and basically what I want is I want 4 targets in each shot.
Frank will use hundreds of targets because the computer needs multiple reference points to accurately align all the compound curves of the car.
Around the fender here, I know that I can't get all of it in one shot from down below, so I build my targets up in order to be able to get all of it and then move over into the hood.
The key to an accurate digital copy of the car is attention to detail during the photogrammetry process.
I will shoot around the car at the bottom, then I'll move up one level, shoot around it again, and then I'll go to the top and shoot it from the top. And each time I need to see each set of targets in 3 different angles as I do this in order to triangulate.
It is a painstaking process, turning 2-dimensional photographs into 3D computer-generated images.
We're loading in the shots now. These are the shots I took of the car. There's approximately 95 of them. And you see these little yellow dots up here? These are my camera positions as I went around the project. The blue is the last shot that we took, and the gray here is the first shot that we took. So this is our last shot we just took. It shows you where you were at on the last one. And we have a little overlapping data, but the software will actually delete the overlapping data once we've stitched our shots together.
It's an amazing process, and the result is what's called a cloud data file that's loaded into a second highly specialized computer system.
This application here we have brings in the scan data, and that gives us a cloud of points in 3D space that we'll bring into our computer applications to recreate digitally the vehicle. The photogrammetry creates points in space. These points are triangulated, so that's why you see a bunch of triangles. You can get up into the hundreds of thousands of triangles. The point clouds themselves are fairly dense. There's millions of points.
The computer links up all the triangles and the millions of reference points in the cloud data file. The result is a 3D digital representation that perfectly matches the car that was scanned. The margin of error is less than 1/1000th of a millimeter. That's 100 times less than the thickness of one strand of human hair.
Now what you see is the different scan sections. We usually do scan sections X, Y, and Z. That gives you pretty much these curves here. In order to build your body, you're going to need a template. This template for, let's say, across the hood right here is pretty much this section. This section can either be plotted out and printed out and put onto cardboard or put onto a particle board.
Or plywood, which is exactly what Steve Beckman used to create what's called a body buck, a full-scale physical representation of a car body that he'll use to form the actual body panels. It's a combination of classic metalwork and cutting-edge science.
It's phenomenal what it can do. I mean, they can give you a pinpoint everywhere. I showed him where I wanted the stations and gave him a center line, and then they gave me a printed out piece of paper with all the grid lines every 100 millimeters. Then I'd glue the paper down on a piece of plywood, cut it out on the line, and then just jigsawed it together similar, to like this is. That's when we start making the panels.
This is another body buck that Steve Beckman made. Instead of plywood, it was fabricated out of metal tubing. But the end result was the same, a beautifully recreated body of a long-lost classic car. A Type 375 Ferrari. Built in 1954, it was a car that helped establish Ferrari's reputation on the racetrack. And for all Ferraris, whether old or new, the racetrack is where they really want to be. This is a Ferrari Enzo, the newest and fastest street-legal Ferrari in the world. Top speed, more than 200 miles an hour. You won't find a Ferrari Enzo on the lawn at Pebble because it's a brand new model. In fact, among the vintage car collectors at Pebble Beach, speed is a relative thing.
It's a great 45-mile-an-hour car. You're going down the road, you're just in that sweet spot. It'll go faster, it'll probably do 65, 70, but it just feels right about 45, 50 miles an hour. It's really a lot of fun.
A lot of classic cars can go a lot faster than 45 miles an hour. In fact, you'd be surprised at just how fast they can go and how much horsepower there is under all those shiny hoods. One of the most important things in going fast is what's called the power-to-weight ratio, the relationship between the weight of the car and its total horsepower. This 50-year-old Ferrari only has about half the horsepower of the newest Ferrari Enzo, but it only weighs about half as much as the new car. That's because 50 years ago, they didn't put in things like air conditioning, airbags, and ABS brake systems. The new car is much safer. The old car is much lighter. With similar power-to-weight ratios, both cars are very fast.
Job. Nice. I guess we got a grandfather.
When Tom Shaughnessy first found his barn-find Ferrari, it had a 50-year-old engine that had blown up long ago. Getting it to run again will be a major part of restoring the car.
The motor, anything can be replaced inside of it, but I'm sure I'm starting with a bucket of worms. I'm sure there'll be some gears that need to be made. I know I need to make camshafts for the car. But that's most of the engine builder's job.
Don McCaskill is a car engine expert who specializes in using a computer-controlled machine called a dynamometer, or Dyno for short. It's a crucial tool for engine builders. It allows them to run their engines under laboratory-like conditions, measuring every critical function, including fuel and airflow, oil and water temperatures, with scientific precision. The dyno also measures the engine power in a way that's both simple and surprising. It uses water pressure. Imagine a series of boat propellers inside the dyno's large metal tank. Fill the tank with water, connect the engine with a crankshaft, and you can measure how much force it takes for the car engine to spin the propellers against the resistance of the water inside. The twisting force needed to make the propellers turn is called torque.
It transmits the load that the engine's putting out to this device right here, which is the torque arm. It's called a torque arm. And this arm is attached to a highly sensitive torque measuring device. It's called a load cell. And this load cell basically is what measures the amount of power that's coming out of the engine.
The computer attached to the dyno is programmed with a specific formula. Measuring the torque in revolutions per minute of the engine, it determines the total horsepower.
This is the brains of the dyno. All the information is taken from the sensors inside the room here and transmitted back to this computer. This is the throttle. This is just like your gas pedal right here. And this is how I can control the throttle in the engine, just with this, just like you would in a car, just like the gas pedal in the car does. Turn the computer on, and I'll set the RPM of the engine where I want it to start. I'll push a button and the computer takes over. Computer did all the work. I shut it off, push a button, and it tells me everything that the motor just did in that period of 10 seconds or so. It gives me every reading that every sensor that I have inside the computer, the dyno cell, shows up on this screen. It tells me exactly what the motor's doing.
The dyno readout shows engine builders what adjustments to make to the engine, like fuel and air mixtures. Then, it can actually simulate the demands placed on the engine in a car. Simply put, the dyno helps technicians pre-tune the engine at the shop, so it will work perfectly the very first time you turn the key in your driveway. When it comes to classic cars, making a rebuilt engine perfect means actually making it better than the day it came off the assembly line, with more power and more reliability. There's only one trick. Make sure the new old engine looks just like it did on the outside when the classic car rolled out of the factory.
Everybody does tend to modernize internally for both performance, current gasoline, and for safety.
For car hunters like Freeman Thomas, performance is what it's all about. When he's not working or out with Tom Shaughnessy on a barn find, Freeman's behind the wheel of his own classic car project, an early Porsche 911 he restored. The engine looks original, but inside it's been modernized to crank out 280 horsepower.
The engine is kind of like a bad boy kind of thing. The engine was owned by a guy named Big Eddie who street raced on Mulholland. The police sort of cracked down back in 74, 75, and his car got impounded. And the engine was in the impound for about 2 years, and it took his lawyers that long to get the car out.
Science has always been part of Freeman's 4-year-long restoration process. When he didn't have a part or couldn't find a part, like some of the special tie-down straps under the hood, he made them, but it wasn't done the old-fashioned way.
We did a CAD program for that, and they're laser milled and just beautifully made, but they look exactly like the original pieces.
Using science and technology is also a safety issue when you're restoring a classic car, especially a vintage race car. That's what Steve Tillack is doing at his classic car restoration shop in Redondo Beach, California. After Tillack bought this 1980 Formula One Lotus, he discovered it didn't have the correct wheels. It wasn't just a question of an accurate restoration to get the details right, it was a question of safety. The car has more than 600 horsepower, and under full throttle, the wheels must withstand tremendous forces.
We were very fortunate to come up with a design or a drawing from Lotus that shows some of the basic parameters of the design. The number of holes that were supposed to be drilled in it, where the holes were supposed to be located. So it was a very valuable piece of information. Interesting to note that when the car was being designed, this is how it was designed, with a drafting machine or a T-square and a pencil. Now we do it on a computer.
By measuring the old drawings as well as the car itself, Tillack was able to reverse engineer a design for new old wheels. This is how the process of reverse engineering works. By taking careful measurements of the pieces you do have, you can begin to make assumptions about what the missing piece would have looked like. It is often trial and error, but modern 3D computer design programs significantly speed up the process. Reverse engineering is a way to go back in time and figure out what engineers were thinking years ago when they built these exotics. Becoming a classic car hunter is also about going back in time to make the old dreams of young men come true.
Most of these cars, for most of their owners, is an extension of their personality. I grew up around these cars, but of course I couldn't afford what I wanted. To buy this car finished, you could never pay for it, so you have to build it.
It starts when you're very young and you have speed genes and they become active at an early age. And you start with wagons and go-karts, and my go-kart had a Harley 74 flathead on it with the gearbox and juice brakes in the back, and almost killed myself many times on it, but that was the great fun.
And now, as a grown man, David Sidorik's idea of fun is to hunt down classic cars. In a world where so many cars are rare, David Sidorik has his sights set on an even more elusive target. His collection is focused on cars with unusual handmade bodies from an Italian company named Zagato.
Zagato's signature was the double bubble roof, and it was for a guy could wear a helmet and be tall and be in the car. And Zagato was known for very lightweight, thin-bodied, all aluminum, plexiglass, racing, lightweight bodies. At any rate, 19 of these were made. All of them were made with the flat roof, and one was made with a double bubble roof, and this is it.
A one-of-a-kind car designed with a bubble in the roof in order to go racing. And racing is one more part of the Pebble Beach experience. Each year, the Monterey Historic Car Races at the Mazda Raceway at Laguna Seca are a chance to turn years of hard work into the thrill of a lifetime and let these rare vintage classics do what they were meant to do.
I enjoy working with my hands and, making, something nice out of a piece of junk, but, I just as much, the real reward is to get in it and drive it and really drive it hard and have a good time.
Winning isn't really the objective here. These cars are too rare and too valuable to risk a disaster. So these races have two unusual rules. Bump another car and you're disqualified. Run off the track and you're also out of the race. But don't think for a second, just because these cars are old, that they're also slow. In a recent racetrack test, comparing 3 vintage race cars with a brand new Porsche GT3. One of the old cars was faster than the Porsche, one about even, and the third only slightly slower around the track. To be fair, the Porsche isn't a full-out race car, and it's certainly a much safer automobile, but it weighs almost 3 times as much as the vintage race cars. No matter what the age, power-to-weight ratios still rule the road. But when all is said and done, vintage races are about fun. All about a chance to see the very latest in exotic cars on display along pit row, and the joy of watching classic cars back on the racetrack after years of work and restoration. Another part of the Pebble Beach experience is what's called the Motorsports Gathering. It costs $150 just to get in. There are dozens of beautifully restored cars on display, as well as vendor exhibits where you can find all sorts of parts for your own classic car project. Tom Shaughnessy was at the Motorsports Gathering using his barn find as a one-of-a-kind advertisement to draw a crowd to his collection of one-of-a-kind parts.
Tom Shaughnessy, nice meeting you. No, the 2-cam, it came off a 2-cam. The air cleaner goes to him also. There's nothing wrong with that 4-cam. There's nothing wrong. And this just comes with it. So whether you want it or not, it comes with it. 15,000.
The parts were all for sale. The car was the only thing Tom had brought with him that wasn't.
It was real interesting today just to see everyone just look at all the features, because these cars are so infrequently seen, and this car hasn't been seen since the 70s. It still is a one-off design. It looks really good on the lawn with the big long nose and kind of the Barracuda back. It was a good day.
Freeman Thomas was too busy working to attend Pebble Beach. Instead, he took his classic Porsche to a car show closer to home in Southern California. Freeman had spent 4 years recreating a 1969 factory special Porsche 911S. It was called a works model, meaning it could have been ordered directly from the factory with all the modifications Freeman put into it: a special lightweight body, high-performance engine, special brakes, a large racing fuel tank, even a special oversized fuel filler cap, very carefully installed after cutting out a hole right in the middle of the hood. One of the finishing touches was an original set of extra rally lights on the front of the car. Freeman Thomas, the car designer, had built himself a one-of-a-kind car, and for the first time, he was ready to compete in a local car show.
Got up to the Palos Verdes Concours, and I felt very good because I was invited. I detailed out the car the night before, but I didn't really think about whether it would win or lose or anything. But then when they announced that my car had won its class, which was a very competitive class, I was elated.
But the joy didn't last very long. On his way home, Freeman's very special Porsche was hit by another car.
You're looking back at your car and you're seeing your beautifully restored machine. It's all crunched up in the front. I'm sure the guy in the tow truck is thinking, here's this guy who has his crash machine, but he's telling me to be careful with his car.
So now, Freeman Thomas plans to restore the Porsche all over again. When it's done, it will be better than new, just like all the cars competing at Pebble Beach. When the best of the best in classic car restorations are finally completed, this is where they end up. On one Sunday morning each year, the 18th fairway at this world-famous golf course becomes the most exclusive car gathering in the world, the Pebble Beach Concours D'Elegance.
This award is the car deemed to be most elegant in motion. It must have participated in the Pebble Beach tour, and it was chosen by the special committee.
The majority of cars here have undergone major restorations, but there is a special category for cars in such excellent condition, no restoration is necessary. And on very rare occasions, one of these cars is a barn find.
So we opened the door, ta-da, Duesenberg. Hadn't been touched since 47. And I mean, everything in the garage was 1947. So I'm going to bring it up here next year in the preservation class. It's too nice to even restore.
Memory of the three-time Le Mans winner who produced the Ferrari in America.
Each year at Pebble Beach, one or two brands of special cars are uniquely highlighted. This year, both Ferrari and Rolls-Royce are being specially honored.
To the best overall Ferrari on the field as chosen by the special committee.
The judging panels are made up of former automobile industry executives, car designers, automotive museum curators, and motor journalists, as well as former Pebble Beach winners.
You know, the presentation to the judges is all pretty much the same. You know, the judges know me, I know the judges. You know, we kind of both know, you know, all the steps to the dance.
It's really a very simple dance. Points are deducted for anything that doesn't look perfectly original. The car with the fewest deductions wins.
Monsieur Peugeot, would you present this award to this wonderful car?
This year, David Sidoric has brought his 1956 Ferrari 250 GT to the 18th fairway. Like his Maserati, it has a Zagato body with the trademark double bubble roofline. His Ferrari is only on display and not in competition. But David Sidoric knows what it feels like to compete at Pebble Beach. He's won best of class 5 different times.
When you go up there are 3 cars across there at the gate, and you don't know if you're first, second, or third. So they point to the third place, and then there's 2 cars left. So you're either first or second, and then the next car is second, and finally the first car goes up last. So it's stress all the way to the end.
This is the co-chair award. Wonderful, wonderful showing car.
There were 27 different classes of cars judged at Pebble Beach, representing more than a century of automotive history. There were competitors from 30 different states and 14 different countries, and thousands of spectators from all over the world to see the 210 extraordinary cars that sat on the lawn.
Comes from Shelby, Michigan.
The Concours D'Elegance is the ultimate celebration of the automobile, the ultimate goal for classic car hunters.
They're all special one-off cars that are not pedestrian delivery cars. And there's only a couple left that haven't been restored, and mine's one of them.
I'm very excited. I won my class. Thank you very much. That's the great thing about Pebble Beach. When a simple millionaire can compete against billionaires and win. You see what I'm saying? That is the spirit of Pebble Beach.
There's fun in the festivities, but the real spirit of Pebble Beach is what drives classic car hunters all year long. Even before this weekend comes to an end, David Sidoric is thinking about next year at Pebble. He's already found a one-of-a-kind car to restore, a car to bring to the lawn after bringing it back to life.
Next year's concourse, the feature will be Alfa Romeo, and I expect to have a Zagato-bodied Alfa Romeo here.
For David Sidoric, the Alfa Romeo could well be win number 6 at Pebble Beach. For Tom Shaughnessy, seeing his barn find on the lawn would be the dream of a lifetime come true.
I, too, can be part of this a year or two from now, or 3 years, and this is why I do what I do. But the Europa is certainly worthy of the lawn. It can't be a barn find for somebody else. It's time to resurrect it and make it a car.
It is the dream of all classic car hunters to see their cars in competition here at Pebble Beach. It's what they do and why they do it, and why the hunt continues.